Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Martha Powell. I'm the President and CEO of the London Community Foundation, and I welcome everybody here to come to our second vital conversation. Our first one was on belonging. This one is Be Sheltered, and they're all based on the vital signs report that are on your table, so please have a look at that if you haven't seen it. A special thank you to the Italian Seniors Project for hosting us this evening. Claudio and Rogers out there and Han and Kitty have all done great jobs to welcome us, so thank you. And great food, by the way. I'd like to thank Deloitte, who has been our sponsor for all of our conversations, and wonderful supporters of London Community Foundation. So I'd like to introduce you to Stuart Cottrell. He's the tax partner at Deloitte to bring some remarks. Stuart?
Thanks, Martha. Super excited to be here today, and thank you all for coming. This is a very meaningful thing for us at Deloitte to be part of, and it's super exciting. I know myself personally, I sit on the Chamber Board and the Government Affairs Committee, and often as we talk about issues, as we're talking about business, it ends up descending into discussions about community, about shelter, about employment, about addiction, and all these things that all interweave together. And at the end of the day, shelter is a giant piece of what is key to our community and to the people that are in it. And so for me, I'm super excited to be here and to participate today, and I think this will be a fantastic workshop. So thank you everyone for coming and being part of this. Thank you, Martha.
So it's very fitting that we are holding our vital conversation on housing in one of the affordable housing units that we have funded through our Social Impact Fund. Over the past few years, London Community Foundation has committed to driving solutions to the affordable housing crisis in our community, and I use the word crisis because I think we are in a crisis, and I'm sure there's a lot of folks in the room that would probably agree with me. We currently have $1.8 million invested in social finance loans for affordable housing out in our community, and 4 projects in approximately $3 million in the pipeline right now. So our foundation is very committed. As you can tell, we've got about $8.6 million ready to be invested in affordable housing. So we're taking this very seriously. Some of our board people are here who have been involved and very supportive and committed to moving the needle on housing in our community. We are partnering with Community Foundations of Canada to build even more investment in our community. We're part of a national movement of 191 community foundations. So with that, I'd like to welcome Claudio Divincio from the Italian Seniors Project, who has seen the impact of these loans and firsthand, and to give a land acknowledgement and share a bit about his journey with London Community Foundation. Claudio?
We would like to acknowledge the history of the Indigenous territory on which we meet today. It seems all the more fitting because Indigenous peoples have stewarded these lands and built their homes here for thousands of years. The Atlohsa peoples once settled this region alongside the Algonquin and the Haudenosaunee peoples and used this land as their traditional hunting grounds. The 3 current and long-standing Indigenous groups of the geographic region are the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenape peoples, also referred to as Delaware or Munsee. The 3 First Nation communities closest to, in proximity to us in this territory now, are the Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, the Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation. We respectfully give this acknowledgement as allies in the work to improve the lives of peoples in the region. As Martha said, my name is Claudio DiVincenzo. I am a director on the Italian Seniors Project. It's a nonprofit charity. They are the builders of the building that we currently house. I'd like to also recognize our chair, Carla Gargoza, who is sitting here, Joe Raffa, Roger Crunchy, who's at the back, he's our vice chair, and Angela Greco-Wilson. In addition to that, we have about 6 other directors. I want to get a couple of things straight. Yes, some of us are Italian, but not all of us on the board. So the Italian Seniors Project is not just for Italians, and we're working on that whole branding thing right now. But it's one of those things that people think, oh, this place is just for Italians. We have Germans, Hungarians, Portuguese, Francophone, Anglophone, everything in this building. It's quite a mix, actually. So no, this is not a building for just Italians and just for seniors. Sorry, this building is just for seniors, but our new project isn't, because this is a senior-geared building. So I wanted to get that clear. It just so happens that the people that started the charity 15 years ago happened to be Italian at the time, and they thought it was a cool name, but we're working on that. The London Community Foundation is a leader in supporting different initiatives like affordable housing. Together with the London Community Foundation, the Italian Seniors Project was able to gain access to much-needed funds, not only to acquire land, and for some of you who drove down Hamilton, you'll see a huge dirt pile across the street. Well, that's about 185 by 600 feet, and that's our new project that we just got shovel-ready and have just started. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I can tell you from the experience we currently have, this is 52 units, and that is 60 units. It is nowhere near the amount of housing that is required in this city to house the number of people. We could fill this building 4 times tomorrow morning if we had the funds and if we had the properties built. So that's a key point, is that there really isn't enough out there. And as the London Community Foundation uses their funds to help charities like us, that's really the only way we're going to be able to create more housing. The funds that we received not only helped in land acquisition. When you buy land and you go to a bank, they want to know how you generate your income to pay them. Well, that wasn't the case with London Community Foundation. We told them we'd pay them, and we have. We make our payments on our loans every month, but they made it very easy for us. In fact, the first time we went to them, from the first day we ever met to the money in the bank was 3 months, which to me was phenomenal. And it was a testament to Martha and their staff and the vision that they had. It really fit our vision in terms of assisting people. To date, we have received $900,000, so I guess we got about half of what she already gave away. And in effect, this money really serves 2 purposes. First, it provides funding to the Italian Seniors Project, and other projects, obviously, to move ahead, to provide finances. And secondly, it also provides a healthy investment and a return to the LCF donors. So while we're paying you interest, that money's going back to the donors' endowment funds rather than into a bank. No bankers here, right? So that money really gets recycled. And quite frankly, it is the classic, the gift that keeps on giving. Because while we're using your money, we're paying you some investment income on it, someone else will use that money later. And the endowment fund stays the way it is. It tends to stay high, and generating that income allows you to do more of these projects, which I think is really important. Not that I hate banks and they shouldn't make profits because I invest in them, but the London Community Foundation does really well by taking these funds in the way they're using them in cases like ours, and then using them again for other folks. This current building is actually called Residenza Italia, in case you didn't notice it on the sign at the front. The next one across the street is going to be named Residenza Ortona. The Italian Seniors Project charity has tried to give something back to the community of London for the blessings that we've all received in our adopted country. As the CEO of the HDC once said, Stephen Giustizia, I didn't know you were going to be here, but I had already written my speech. Stephen Giustizia, for those who don't know. He once said to other groups that were looking to build affordable housing, go visit Residenza Italia and see how it is to correctly build affordable housing that does not look like it's affordable. And then we try to do that. I think if you were able to go through the building, you'll see these places like high-end condos, and we treat them that way, regardless of what the rents that are paid and the residents that are here. The Italian Seniors Project has tried not only to build a building that houses seniors in this area and any age in the one across the street, but also to build communities that will also provide them a relief from loneliness and a place that they can interact daily with their neighbors and their friends. Our first project focused totally on seniors, and this is the building that you're on here. And that was the original mandate of our charity. The new project focuses on any new members of the community, regardless of age, but it has a more specific mandate, and that is working with the Royal Canadian Legion to house Canadian veterans. Our first project, you can clap if you want, that was a good one. And I want to clear it up one more time. The Italian Seniors Project name is only the name of the charity. This has nothing to do with just Italians and seniors anymore, okay? I just want to repeat that one. It's the #1 question we get. Is this place just for Italians? The answer is no. We've got many different cultures here, as I mentioned. Let me talk briefly on our new project, Residence Ortona. This building will not only help support London's present-day veteran population, but it also will honor the Canadians who gave their life in the past battle. In December of 1943, Canadian troops were dispatched to liberate the fishing town of Ortona on the east coast of Italy. In an unfamiliar setting against experienced and battle-hardened enemy force, the Canadian 1st Infantry Division and the Canadian 1st Armored Brigade fought for 8 days over Christmas, finally liberating the town on December the 28th. Many Canadians gave their lives that day, and a testament to the strength and resilience of our troops. And the Italian Seniors Project has named Residence Ortona in honor of their sacrifice. I was there last summer, I should tell you. Just outside of town, there is a Canadian War cemetery. There are 1,615 tombstones. 1,375 are Canadian soldiers, including a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old who lied to get into the Army. It was quite a moving, and that's one way we want to repay, and that's why this place would now be called Residence Ortona. In closing, and on behalf of our board of directors and our current and our future residents, I wish to thank the London Community Foundation, its donors, and specifically the Social Impact Fund for helping us help others. I want to leave you with a final thought. Please never doubt the impact of a small group to make a difference in helping people and changing lives. Thank you.
I am not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say. No one wants your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say. No one look you as you are, but won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are glorious. When the sharpest words are coming down, gonna send the flood and drown it out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come, and I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. It's my skin. Go far away, 'cause today I won't let the shame sink in. We are warriors. We are warriors. Won't let them bring me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we're glorious. The sharpest words won't cut me down. Gonna send the flood, gonna drown it out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. This is me. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send a flood, gonna drown 'em out. This is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. This is me.
Just to let you know, that video was in partnership. Those were the grade 10 choir from CCH, and that's them singing. Amazing voices and a great partnership, and we're really proud of the work that we've done so far with them. So thank you. So as a community housing provider, the London Middlesex Community Housing provides shelter to over 5,000 people and some of the most vulnerable community members. Those who call LMCH home are a diverse cross-section of individuals, including families, seniors, adults, and new Canadians, all of whom are living with limited income and various levels of required supports. Supports we as an organization simply can't provide by ourselves. Good evening, my name's Josh Browne, and for the last 3 years I've had the privilege of leading an organization and staff that care about the people we house at LMCH. People like the ones you saw in the video, who are strong, who belong, are brave, are survivors that matter, and have a future. That's why we are reforming, we're reshaping, we're repositioning LMCH from an organization focused on compliance to one of compassion. We want to be known as a landlord, or actually as a housing provider that cares, rather than a landlord that simply exists to evict or not even respond. So every day we come to work with the intent to positively impact someone's life and make change. It's not about getting it right every time. It's about falling forward and having the courage to do the right things rather than focusing on doing things right. And we do this through our core values of care. We aim to collaborate and be committed to our mission, to be accountable and accessible, to foster respect and be responsive, to promote equity, and to pursue excellence. So at our core, we believe that housing is the foundation for a better tomorrow. For us to be sheltered is much more than providing just a roof over someone's head or even access to an affordable, adequate, and safe place to live. While all those are highly important aspects, for us it's really about walking alongside people through their journey of change and providing opportunities and support to stabilize, to heal, to breathe, to reconnect, to learn, and to grow by providing a place to call home. It's about belonging, dignity, and respect through compassionate human interactions to let people know that they matter, because housing matters, what we do matter, what you all do in this room matters, but people matter more. This work, as many of you know, is not without challenges, including the lack of community resources, but there are positive and inspiring things happening, and we can change the future if we can come together as a community with one common inspiring vision and purpose. For us, it's important to truly, or if we want to truly be a client-centric organization, we have to first listen to the people we serve and then respond to their needs. Be sheltered takes on a whole new meaning when you talk to people who have gone without and can speak to the reality of how housing has impacted their lives. So let me tell you the story of Marshall, who is one of our tenants. And I've had the privilege actually to get to know Marshall over the last couple of years. His story should inspire all of us that change is possible, and this work, despite some significant challenges, is worth doing. As a former homeless person, one of the biggest challenges he faces is safety in dealing with people who don't live in his building. Listen to his words. Coming from someone that's homeless for a number of years, I can empathize with people who don't have a place to call home. But when your home has become a makeshift shelter because there isn't enough space at the real shelter, it can get dangerous. Our building hosts upwards of 20 to 30 homeless people on any given night, and they congregate in our basement where the laundry facilities are, which makes it impossible for tenants to use that space for its intended purpose. It definitely wears on your health, not only mentally but physically as well. We get harassed if we don't let people into our buildings, and sometimes even threatened. As someone who lives with a disability that hinders my ability to move quickly, it's intimidating to stand up to these people knowing that I can't make a run for it if need be. This is a clear indication that our system is failing us. We find housing through resources like LMCH, and yet still have to deal with the mental and physical trauma of living on the streets. Marshall has also experienced firsthand the lack of supports for people living in social housing in our community. He continues, "There isn't a real investment in proper resourcing that can assist tenants who have different needs. When you get housed, you're given the keys, and the expectation is for you to be successful with your tenancy. Follow the rules and you'll be fine. Unfortunately, it's more complex than that. Our society is made up of people from all walks of life. That's what makes it beautiful. But when you put someone into a situation that they have no experience in and offer no resource or support to help them get started, the odds are not great. The stigma around people living in social housing will never go away if social housing always physically looks the way it does and houses people without providing ongoing support. That stigma hurts all of us. We are people, real human beings who, for whatever reason, have landed here and regardless of that reason, deserve at the very least to be treated with dignity and compassion. Everyone has a story. But what is inspiring about Marshall's story is his hunger for change and the impact community-based programs has had on his life that many of you actually are involved in. He states, I'm very active in community-based programs. There are so many non-official community improvement programs that are usually organized and funded by individual people and groups who are passionate about making a difference in our community. These mosaics, or the mosaics that you see when driving down Dundas Street, and the mural behind the Baker's Dozen is a great example of bringing a community together. Another great example is the Arcade Mission. It is run by a group of the most caring and community-centric people that you'll ever meet. They treat everyone with dignity and respect and give people the opportunity to express themselves through art, through religion, volunteerism, or simply just a safe place to grab a bite to eat. Marshall, and I think like many of you and I believe that there is hope for a better tomorrow, even though affordable housing is not affordable for people like him. He goes on to say, without social housing, I would still be on the streets or dead. Because of services like OW, I'm able to afford the right to a home without wondering how I'm going to eat dinner. Do I still struggle with basic income? Of course. It definitely takes a lot of budgeting, and if you aren't someone who has the knowledge or skill for that, it can be extremely challenging and demoralizing. It's important to be educated on the difference between affordable and social housing, because someone like me who receives OW while working part-time under their guidelines, living in an affordable housing unit is unattainable. I'm so grateful to social housing for giving me a home I can afford, but I would like to move on to something better someday. Unfortunately, with the way affordable housing works, it isn't in the cards. For Marshall, being sheltered isn't so much about safety or even human rights. He ends by saying, to me, it's about going to sleep at night knowing that in the morning there won't be someone standing over you telling you have to move. It's not about having your existence challenged. Be sheltered might mean that you're protected from the rain, the wind, the snow, but it doesn't mean you're protected from society. When I was homeless, there was always the fear that my shelter would be torn down, overrun, or that I'd be asked to leave. There was no stability or consistency. So the question for you, the question for me, the question for us collectively is, what are we going to do? So for LMCH, we aim to respond by providing safe and quality homes, the right supports for tenants to ensure housing stability, opportunities for community development and participation, and ultimately being a vendor of hope for a better tomorrow. Thank you. Many of you don't know, but Marshall's in the room. So I really would like to acknowledge Marshall and give him a round of applause as well. Thank you, Marshall.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peckham. I believe I know most of you in this room. I am not a social worker, nor do I work in the industry. I'm an avid community volunteer. When I was asked to speak tonight, on Be Sheltered, my reply was, well, if it's on homelessness, I'm not the person to speak this evening. I have been very fortunate. I have never been homeless. I've never slept in an alley. I've never slept on a sidewalk. I've never slept on a grate to be warm, or I've never slept by the river. I did, although, after I thought about it, I followed up with an email to Nick and Vanessa and said, maybe there is one thing I might be able to talk about. So this is just a short story of my story. The walls of this Italian Senior Center could not be any closer to my roots than it is. I was born and raised exactly across the road, 3 houses down, in the Red Rick building. This is where I was born and raised, in London's East End. I'm sorry. I had loving parents and an older brother and sister. We weren't rich. I thought we were middle class. We had a roof over our head, food on the table, and clothes on our back. But then I got thinking, as I was writing this, is there really the classifications of lower, middle, and upper class anymore? I couldn't come up to an answer with that. Perhaps if one of you has one, I'd like that you would share it with me at some point. After secondary school, I went to Fanshawe College, obtained a degree as a law clerk, and proceeded to start my career working for a 2-man law firm. I loved my job. I not only loved my job, I loved working. I felt that my life was about as pretty close as perfect as it could get. I was to the point where I could afford to travel if I wanted to. I could maybe afford a semi-used good car, and I'd started a pension plan. But then, unfortunately, something happened to me. I came down with chronic pain. Chronic pain sometimes can never be diagnosed. According to the Chronic Pain Association of Canada, when pain continues in our bodies, there are changes that happen to our pain messaging systems, and these changes make chronic pain a disease and no longer a symptom. I knew my work performance had declined. I tried my very best. I worked nights, I worked weekends, I did whatever I could to obtain the standards that my boss had taught me to achieve. In the 20th year of my employment with my 2-man law firm, I was presented with a small diamond pendant. It was worthless to me. Not worthless, worthful to me. Now, unfortunately, I received a note from my boss in 2001. At the top it says, I must look at long-range planning. You are in your mid-40s and you are readily employable now, but won't be in 5 years. Therefore, over the next year, you should look for a new job with another law firm. I believe that your best position is to apply while still employed here. Not only was I handed this letter, I was also asked if I could type it. Because, of course, I worked for my boss. For a year, I went into work to a place that didn't want me. But I'm a little bit stubborn at times, and so I stuck it out. I made it until October the 16th of the following year, because I knew that if I quit, I would have no income. I would not be eligible for employment insurance. And then where would I be? I then went on and was able to obtain my Canada Pension Plan disability pension. And along with my pension and a little bit of income from my mom every once in a while, I was able to maintain an apartment that I had lived in for 30 years. My mom then went into long-term care. And I knew that I had a few decisions that I had to make at that point in my life. And one was that I was going to have to give up my home. A home that had been my home for, as I say, 30 years. Be sheltered. I found what I thought was a solution. I rented a converted attic area in a private residence back in London's East End, just down the street. One of the biggest changes in my new residence was the fact that I had to share a kitchen with the landlord, or as we shall say, the owner of the private residence. That was quite an adjustment for myself, as well as for the owner of the home. Packing again was something else. It's hard to go from 30 years in a 2-bedroom apartment into 2 rooms and no kitchen of your own. So, knowing that I would probably never have any more dinner parties, I packed up my good china. I used to collect Royal Daltons. They too are put away. My landlord has allowed me to put the boxes in his basement, where they will probably always remain. I will always be poor, but I'm not unhappy. I'm very fortunate, and I know that. I have plenty of friends, and for that, I am truly grateful. In order for me to learn as much as I could about the areas that I thought were now going to be a part of my life, poverty, affordable housing, and homelessness, I attended as many workshops and symposiums as I could. I went to a talk that was put on by CIRA. That refers to the Center for Equality Rights in Accommodations. Excuse me. It was there that I was told, and I want to say this verbatim if I may. A tenant who shares a kitchen or bathroom with the owner or owner's family does not have a legal right to remain living on the premises without the owner's consent and can be evicted at any time without notice. This is under the Human Rights Code policy. There is somewhat fluctuation under the Residential Tenancies Act. I still believe you would have a big fight on your hands. And if my landlord was to come to me and say I was out tomorrow, I couldn't afford to fight him. So once again, I would be looking to be sheltered. I trust that doesn't happen, and I trust that you would share that part of my story, because I don't think it's something that a lot of people realize, that in our society, that you can just be told that you have to leave. I think that pretty well sums up what I really wanted my part of my story on Be Sheltered is about. I would like to thank the London Foundation for having me this evening. But just on a final note, my sense of belonging touches not only on the location of one's home, but what goes along with that home. The library, where you've always felt comfortable, or the elderly person that lived beside me when I was in the apartment, who I always ensured had groceries in her refrigerator. I lost my sense of belonging, but with the help of all of you and a very special shout out to London for All, I have found my way back. Thank you.
Bonjour, minogishgad ginawea, jo nanganimki kwe indigenicas, nimki indodem, mishifanishnabe kwe indao, Red River and Donjiba. Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrea, and so I just introduced myself in the Ojibwe or Anishinaabe language. And so when I do that, or when my friends or family, our community members do that, what we're doing is situating ourselves within a network of relationships. So I said who I am, my name. I said what my clan was, so my extended family relationships. I said what my nation was, so who my people are. And I said where I'm from, the land where I actually come from. And when we say Indigenicas, that word actually means the elements from which I come. And so the reason that we do this is so key to what our understanding of be sheltered, or in what Indigenous homelessness, how we can define this, because it's a notion, I guess we could call, of embodied emplacement. And so a simple way of saying that is how I as a human being exist in relationship to all these different things around me. So this is really key to what our understanding is. So I work at Atlohsa Family Healing Services. And in my role there, I'm the Indigenous community planner. And so over the last few years, the focus of my work has been Indigenous homelessness here in London. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Atlohsa, we're an Indigenous nonprofit here in London with the mandate to provide culture-based programs and services to all members of the family. So we provide services for babies and children, youth, men and women, as adults and elders as well, and two-spirited people. And we are also the only organization in London who's mandated to serve the Indigenous population experiencing homelessness. So I'm really grateful to be here today to share some of the little of what I've learned on Indigenous homelessness here in our community. So we know from the stats that Indigenous people are overrepresented nationwide within the homeless populations. And so London is no exception to that. And we know from the 2018 point in time count that Indigenous peoples make up 29% of the population who is homeless. And I have a few other stats to share with you this evening, because I know folks really like numbers. So some of these come from some really interesting community-based projects that have been happening here in London. And so one of them is the Giwatashkad Indigenous Homelessness Planning Project that we've been leading at Atlohsa. And there's also the SOHAC, so the Southwest Ontario Aboriginal Health Access Centre. They did a study called Our Health Counts, which looked at health of the Indigenous population in London and some of the social determinants of health. And we also have some really interesting numbers that are coming out of Atlohsa's overnight resting space, which has been in operation since April 1st of this year. And so we provide 10 overnight resting beds for all community members as part of London's coordinated response. And since April 1st, we've served over 400 unique individuals as part of this program. So just think about the magnitude of that with 10 beds. We've interacted with over 400 unique individuals, and at least 31% of those have been members of the Indigenous community. So some of the stats I'd like to share with you, just to give a bit of a perspective on what Indigenous homelessness looks like in London, that 1 in 5 Indigenous adults are precariously housed or experiencing homelessness. 1 in 3 Indigenous men are living in an institution, precarious housing, or experiencing homelessness. Through the study that I did, 68% of people who are experiencing homelessness ascribed the cause of their homeless to family conflicts, relationship breakdown, or abuse. 40% of the people that I spoke to were youth experiencing homelessness, And this is from the SOHAC study that a shocking 92% of Indigenous children in London live in households that fell below the low income before tax cutoff. So these numbers speak for themselves, right? They don't tell the entire picture, but they do give quite a picture. And so we know that Indigenous peoples are overrepresented in almost anything negative, right? If you watch the news, you've seen this, right? So we're overrepresented in all the social determinants of health, of rates of incarceration and interaction with the justice system, some of the one of the highest suicide rates in the world, right? And so we know that we can situate this within a violent history of colonization. And that's where the family unit itself was targeted, right? And so this is why at Atlohsa, we focus on the entire family unit. And now, as of a couple weeks ago, we actually have a national report, the report from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirited People that is using the word genocide to describe what these tactics were. As part of this process of colonization, everything that we knew, right? Everything that we knew of how to live and be well in this territory right here, because as was shared in the introduction to our event tonight, Indigenous people have been here for millennia, and we've been well, and we've taken care of ourselves, and we've stewarded the land. And everything that we knew of how to do that, we were told was wrong, right? And our families were targeted and pulled apart because of racism, essentially, right? And so this ideology is built right into many of our Canadian institutions, right? And so before colonization, homelessness didn't exist, right? Because every person had a place, right? We all existed within relationship within our communities, and every single person had a place. And so the stats that I've just shared with you around the situation on Indigenous homelessness in London, they paint a very different picture, but they don't paint the entire picture, right? What these stats do not show is the incredible strength and resiliency of community members who are experiencing homeless, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, right? These are some of the strongest folks that you will meet who are surviving through conditions that I don't know that many of us would survive through ourselves, right? And so this view that folks experiencing homelessness, they have an inherent value. They are inherently valuable community members, and this is what we hope will shine through the planning process that we've undertaken as part of Giwatashkad, an Indigenous homelessness strategic plan that will soon be completed. This process has been a really unique process, and it's been based in partnerships. First of all, it's based in us as service providers, community members, people with lived experience, cultural knowledge keepers. It's been based in us working together in a really new and unique way that's based in some of our foundational teachings, and one of them is of honesty, kindness, strength, and sharing. And so this has been the premise that we've worked together on. This process is also driven by the stories and the voices of people with lived experience, who are the real experts on Indigenous homelessness, right? Or who are those folks who have experienced homelessness themselves. Our community engagement process, so myself and a research assistant, we undertook an extensive process of having conversations with folks who had been experiencing homelessness. And it was really important to us that we do this in a good way, right? And we really wanted to put the agency in that person to tell their story how they wanted to tell it. And so we just put it out there. We said, you can talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about, right? And so we're really excited to be able to share the results of this really soon. But the main thing that we heard in almost every single conversation over and over and over was, I feel invisible. That exact word was a feeling of invisibility. And so that we found that went right in hand, right? We took a view of empowerment, that these folks have inherent value in what they need to say, and then what we heard them say was, I feel invisible. So what else we learned was that Indigenous homelessness is not just about having four walls, kind of what I shared in the beginning when we introduce ourselves, right? We're situated within a network of relationships that is much greater than just ourselves. So when I was really thinking about and preparing this talk on this idea of be sheltered, I really was thinking, like, what does this word mean to me? And to help me gain some context on that, I went and asked the language speaker what our word for shelter is. And the word that this person told me was dabenuigan. And so at the root of this word is binu. So the B means a place, and the inu is some place that you point to, right? So it was something that was like really specific to usage. But as I asked more people, dabenuigan, I would say this word, and people who were reminded and kept telling me, oh, that's one of our songs. That's in one of our songs. And what the translation of the song was I am walking in a sheltered place, right? And so what this means in a ceremonial context was that a sheltered place is this earth, right? That as human beings, we have come here, right, from our original home, or whatever your view might be. For us, we say giwe. That's our word for home, right? And it's a spirit home. It's the northern direction, and so that's where we go home to. And so a sheltered place is this earth, right? This earth is a sheltered place. And so I found that really interesting. And it spoke to this concept exactly, that homelessness for Indigenous people is not just about having four walls. It's about having connection to community. And for some people, maybe their shelter is the sky, right, for that given night. So that's it for me. Miigwech for listening.
Wow, this is a hard act to follow. First of all, I want to say thank you to Martha and the London Community Foundation for inviting me home, because London is my home. I grew up here, and I always love coming back, so thank you very much. My name's Nonie Brennan, and I just happen to live in Chicago. Somehow I ended up in the United States for the last 28 years, and I'm still trying to figure that out. But while I've been there, I've really tried to work to make the communities that I lived in as great as they can be. And when I think about being sheltered, I think about the idea of home and what home means to all of us. And if you just close your eyes for a moment and think about your home and how it makes you feel and the people you want to be with when you're there, and the safety and the security and the stability that comes with home. I work with people who don't have a home in Chicago, and often they are the most vulnerable people. And for decades, we had increasing numbers of people experiencing homelessness year after year in the city of Chicago. And we decided that we wanted to change that. And changing community issues and challenges is never easy. It's really hard. But we felt that we were up to that task. And so when we set about trying to figure out how do you change the systems that have been not working for decades into systems that are working, we really identified that we had to understand that we had to take a systems thinking approach to the work we were doing. And what we've learned through this systems change is there's really sort of three things that you need to focus on and think about. The first one is that you have to change the work that you're doing from one of charity to one of complex problem solving. So in the homeless world, you'll often hear the term a cot and a hot, where someone goes into a shelter, gets a hot meal and a cot for the night. That's charity. What we wanted to do in Chicago was change the system. So instead of a cot and a hot, somebody was in their own home and was able to make their own dinner. You know, when we started this, I had met a woman who was behind in her rent, and she owed $350 in back rent. And she went around the city trying to find an organization that would help her. And there was nobody who could provide her with the homeless prevention assistance that she needed, $350. And so what happened was she ended up getting evicted. And she ended up moving into a shelter, which was the only shelter that had space for her, which was a women's shelter for women with severe mental health challenges. And she didn't feel safe there, and she was frightened there. But that was the only place where she had shelter. It cost the city of Chicago $70,000 a year for this woman to stay in a shelter that was not appropriate for her. Yet her problem could have been solved for $350 in back rent. And so one of the first things we did was we set about to change the homeless prevention system in the city of Chicago. We looked at where all of the homeless prevention assistance was, and some of it came from the federal government, some of it from the state, some of it from the city, and then there was a pile of it that was private. And we pulled all of those funds in one place, and we founded a central access point that people could call when they needed assistance. And so what we did was not only break down the barriers that kept people from receiving homelessness prevention, but we also provided an opportunity for people in the helping profession to figure out where that money was, because they couldn't even find it when they needed $350. The second thing that we did to change our system in Chicago was we started to work together. When I came to Chicago in 2002, people in the nonprofit community said to me, nobody collaborates here. Nobody works together. It'll never happen. You'll never see it happen here. Today, we have an incredibly well-structured collective impact approach to addressing the issue of homelessness. And it's working. And so when we think about who we bring to the table, we need to bring absolutely everybody to the table. Number one, the mayor has to be at the table because there has to be political will. Not only does he need to be there, but he needs to set goals for the community. He needs to believe in those goals, and he needs to have his whole administration focused on meeting those goals. And he needs to be doing it in full partnership with the nonprofit community who are focused and working on the issue of homelessness. One example of how we've restructured our system in Chicago is we have a board of directors for our continuum of care on homelessness. And on that board of directors is the chief operating officer of the city of Chicago. So when we needed additional units of affordable housing, she was sitting at the table trying to figure out where we'd get them. She went back to the mayor and she said, we need 10,000 more units of affordable housing. And he said, I'll put 6,500 of those units up over the next 3 years. We had the chief housing officer for the Chicago Housing Authority. And when she was trying to help us figure out how we were going to get more housing in our homeless system, she went back to her board, and the board agreed for the first time ever to make homelessness a priority for the Chicago Housing Authority. I kept wondering, who's moving into that housing if they're not homeless? We also had the chief operating officer for Cook County Hospital at the table. And one of the things we know is that there's an incredible relationship between healthcare and homelessness. And so the Cook County Hospital agreed to pilot a program with us that instead of discharging people out of the hospital into homelessness, we would discharge them into housing. And then we would monitor them and see whether their health outcomes were better and whether their health care costs were lower. And we found out pretty quickly that they were. And so Cook County Hospital has just put up an additional $1 million for us to expand this program because they're at the table. We also have service providers at the table because we can't make decisions about how a system is going to work without having the people at the table who are working in the system. And we also always have an equal number of people of lived experience as service providers at the table, because their experience is invaluable in helping us understand what needs to change. So the third thing that we learned in Chicago was, if you really want to change your system from one where you've had decades of increasing numbers of people experiencing homelessness, is you have to focus on data. And so for us, we built a high-quality data system where 1,000 providers every single day are entering data into a system that shows us who's in our homeless system at any time. One of the first things we started to see when we looked at that data was this concept of inflow and outflow. We always knew we had a whole bunch of people in our homeless system, and we knew that some of those people were flowing out of our homeless system. But what we never thought about was who's coming into our system. And when we started looking at these numbers month after month after month, we had more people coming in than going out. And so we started to say, let's look deeper into the data and let's find out, where the heck are people coming from? And what we learned was that 1/3 of them were coming from evictions. And so we did a couple of things. One, we set up a partnership with the eviction court. We put a table right there. We trained the judges and the lawyers, and we had somebody at that table who could provide financial assistance for homelessness prevention and pay back rents on the spot so that we could stop the eviction before it happened. We also increased the amount of funding that we had available for homelessness prevention, and we trained every single caseworker in the city on how to access that funding immediately so that we could stop an eviction in an hour if we had to. And so understanding the data and letting that data drive change in your system is critical. So based on those three things, stop thinking you're in the charity business, understand you're in the complex problem-solving business, start working together and building a system together, identifying where the challenges and problems are, and make sure you've got really good data that can drive the change. So for us in Chicago, it's meant that we have gone from decades of increasing numbers of people experiencing homelessness to the last 4 years of continually decreasing the number of people experiencing homelessness. And today, we have reduced homelessness in Chicago by over 20%. Thank you.